Ja, velkommen tilbage fra frokost. Jeg håber, I nød det lige så meget, som jeg gjorde, og fik tid til at fortælle lidt med hinanden. Der har været nogle spændende emner oppe og nogle spændende taler, så der har i hvert fald også været at tale op, formoder jeg. Nu fortsætter vi dagens program, og jeg er meget glad for at kunne byde velkommen til min medarrangør, Simonsen, som er direktør, eller head of WAYF. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody told me I spoke Danish. I did it again. Ich kann auch auf Deutsch, aber das geht auch nicht. So I'll just speak English. Welcome back from lunch. Sorry I spoke Danish before. I didn't really notice. I'm glad I became aware of it. I'm very glad to welcome my co-event organizer, Simonsen, head of WAYF. On a daily basis, he has an office right next to me, and it has been a pleasure to organize this event with him. And I look very much forward to hear what he has to say. It has an extremely long title, so I need my paper. So Dale will talk about identity in action with no central registry, security, scalability, and economics. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming here, and thank you very much for the wonderful lunch. If I speak a little slowly, it's because I'm still digesting a lot. I'm head of WAYF. It's called Where Are You From? It stands for Where Are You From? Where Are You From is a digital infrastructure, and despite the very strange name, it is a public infrastructure. It has been operational for 6 years, and I'm going to tell you more about that today. It's part of what is called the Danish E-Infrastructure Corporation, which is, again, a public entity under the Ministry of Education. I'm here. Normally, co-organizers do not invite themselves on stage. We had hoped to see a member of the executive branch of the UK government. They're building something very similar. And Chris Ferguson would have been delighted to tell you that he, within the last 6 months, has gathered £200 million. That's a lot of money. £200 million to establish and operate the infrastructure, which is very much alike what we have in WAYF, and that's why there's a match. And I'm going to describe to you how identity can not only be seen as a problem on the internet, but also how identity can be seen as a way to leverage some of the issues that we have and how it can be used in a secure way. So who's building these systems? Don't worry, I'll get to what the systems are and what they look like in a minute. But who are building these systems? Well, we see them organized in sectors, like the educational sector, the biopharmaceutical sectors, the automotive sectors, the aerospace and military sectors. They're really building the same kind of infrastructure, which is called Federated Identity infrastructures. Governments are building these. Governments are on a very large scale building these for internal government use and also for citizen-facing services like tax authorities, web pages. Everybody has to access it. It is being done more and more frequently in a federated fashion. And then we see this technology implemented in a way which I would call service identity provider environments. Think of Facebook login and think of Google login as two prominent examples of how to log in and authenticate, or how to get into, cloud services using something different from the cloud service user management interface that you would typically be equipped with. A username and password-free service is dead. Now you use something else, which is the federated identity model they're using. If you use your identity as key for many of the transactions and services you want to access, then the question quickly becomes, who is backing your identity? Who is really making sure that you are the person that you claim to be? In Denmark, it's the state. When my son was born, even before I got him in my arms, he had a wristband with a social security number printed out and attached to his wrist. So it happens even before he meets his father. In the UK, this is outsourced to the private sector. There's a completely different legal regime about who you are and what your name is and so forth in the UK. This is now being outsourced to the private sector to ensure that you are who you claim to be. In New Zealand, which is very similar in many ways to the UK, they do exactly the opposite. There, the Ministry of Internal Affairs has in their basement a printing machine that prints out passports. They don't outsource this. They really do this, and they make sure that the state and the government knows exactly and registers who you are. Canada, a different model where they separate the authentication bit from the identity bit. And what you can see from all of this is that there are many different solutions in many different places, and that's probably one of the problems that we will have to face very soon, that we have this heterogeneity of solutions. So why are we all doing this? Even though we do it in different ways, why are we doing this? What's the benefit of it? Well, when you talk about security, you also have to talk about the economics, because there is good security and it's typically very expensive, either in user, time spent, or in money. And let me just give you a number about what we have calculated the economic benefit of the WAYF system to be yesterday. Not the day before yesterday, but yesterday. It was 230,062 US dollars. 182,230,062 US dollars. That's a lot of money. That's more than $500 million of Danish kroner. So that's a very large number for a very limited install base, in fact. Okay, so what kind of world are we living in? We are luckily living in a world of problems. If we did not have many problems, we would not be here, gathered in this room. So I think that's a good way to see what kind of a world we're living in. But we have too many usernames and passwords. That's really an issue. That's an issue for the digital experience and the digital life we have. It's a very bad user experience, and it's very bad for security. We also have too many authentications. We have to log in again and again and again. Even though I sit down at my laptop and I type in my username and password, then I go to a website and type in my username and password, I have to check my webmail, a different service, type in username and password. Too many usernames and passwords, too many authentications everywhere in our daily life. So that's problem number 2. And then, of course, since we have these infrastructures, which are very much alike, They all look the same. They all do the same thing. Apparently, we are now in an environment which has so many of the same kind of infrastructures that it should be seen as an extremely expensive infrastructure. And since you have so many instances, it's also a very bad security feature to have your username and personal information and other stuff in many different places. So it's very expensive, it's bad for security, and it's very usual. This is happening everywhere, of course. And one of the issues with this is that we now see a declining trust in the digital infrastructure. That's what, in principle, the Snowden revelations have said out very clearly. Things are happening that you were not aware of. Here's the proof. And in a sense, I have had the same feeling as we saw Mikko Hyppönen present this morning. We wake up, all of a sudden we see things are wrong, but it's not in the morning. We wake up very late in the afternoon, and it seems very difficult to find out what exactly the problem is. So that's what we're looking for now, what the solution is. We're looking for solutions now. One of the issues we have is, of course, that the identity and personal information is a kind of currency on the internet. And if I hand over lots of information to a given site, then dead sure, after 6 months, that will be outdated. So we have an update problem as well. Now, the wish list now is then, I would like to have a single login method. And as most of you are Danish, you all know NemID. This is a single login method, a method that can be used in many different contexts. Right? We would like to see that for the global internet. Well, I would also like to see single sign-on, so I don't have to use this again and again and again. And then, of course, it's stupid to build the same kind of infrastructure so many times, so we would also like to see a reuse of existing infrastructures. And who's wishing this? Well, of course, the users are. It's a complex digital world, and we want to simplify it. The companies want this because they're spending a lot of money on infrastructure they really don't care about, and they're not very well trained to operate this stuff. And governments do this to save money, first of all, and deliver citizen-oriented services. So everybody wants an internet that is safe to use and used a lot. That requires trust. And trust is only established and kept at a sufficient level if there's sufficient security. So we have to find the balance now. Convenience often reduces security. We have to keep that in mind. And trust cultures are very, very different. In the US, there is no such thing as a central person registry like we have in Denmark. It doesn't exist. It does not exist even in the UK. So we have to do something new, and that's called Federated Identity. And here we are. I already told you a little bit about it, but I'm going to walk you through some diagrams that explain to you, hopefully, what is happening. That's me, the user in the middle here, trying to access a service X. Usually I would have a username and password over there. In this case, I'm redirected to a place which asks me, where are you from? Where do you want to log in? That's why we call this system Where Are You From, because we ask the users all the time the same kind of question. And we go somewhere, and this is all in the web browser, and we log in over there, and then information about me is being sent over, and then the service provider over here can have a look at it and say, oh, David from WAYF is not going to get in here. No way. So the authorization decision, the access control is happening at the service provider side. Now this is happening in two different security domains. One over here, which might be in China, one here, which might be in Denmark. And the information about me is flying over the internet. Let me give you an example. Just skip this. Biblioteko, National Library portal, asks the user to log in, to authenticate, come to a very long list of connected institutions. You pick one, Aalborg Studenterkursus, if I'm not wrong. You log in, and they then send over the internet information, which can then be seen by the service provider, CPR and email. That should do it. For the user, it's a well-known authentication mechanism. It's updated user information because they always know who are their students and who are not. and therefore they can trust it. So it's just pure reviews of what is happening, of information already existing and existing systems. Now, what could happen is that you would run into a requirement for consent to engage the user and tell them, look, this is happening, we're going to send this information over there, it's going to be used for this purpose, do you agree to this? And the user typically does and says yes. So a federation is a club. It's a club that works within a specified area, identity, for instance, access management, and this is exactly what it looks like. It's a green thing, a green round thing, and inside you have, inside the circle, inside the collaboration, you have service providers and you have identity providers. It's a club. It's a simple club where you have to live up to certain requirements in order to be a member of the club. There are rules, you can be kicked out, and there are obligations and duties like in any club. So if you are within there, you can actually now tell your users, you can go to all these services and log in using your usual username and password, and that's just fine. The users typically get it the first time, if not the second. I think we're already there. Oh, I'm pushing the wrong button here. So, we have now talked a lot about the problems, and we have heard some solutions and some ideas, and now I'm going to walk you through 3 different architectures, 3 different ways of orchestrating this federated identity environment. And remember, this is happening both at a very small scale and at a national scale. So this is really something we have to care about. This is coming your way if you're not already there. It looks very complicated, like the internet does. This is in fact very simple. It's a peer-to-peer collaboration where people can speak directly to each other. You can go to the service provider over there, and they ask you, where are you from? I'm over from institution number 2 over here, and you log in. They have then to know about what kind of information should be sent, what kind of information is necessary for service provider Y to do the authorization, to look if the user can be granted access or not. Also, number 1 has to do this. And they're only using a single language, only a single protocol, which is the blue arrow protocol. So everybody has to agree on a certain set of technical setups, which is the blue arrows, and everybody has to know about user rights, consent stuff, attribute release policies. And the issue with this is, because it's beautiful, it's decentralized, like the internet was envisioned, but everybody has to know a lot about the stuff that's going on. And it really does not scale to very large installations unless you have very homogeneous environments. The biggest one I know of is almost 2,000 entities participating in the same club, and that's in the UK. I've always also heard that the Department of Homeland Security run an installation with more than 5,000 of these, but it doesn't really count because they really have a homogeneous landscape, at least seen from the outside. So what can we do if we don't like this? The thing is that we spent 2 years trying to implement this in the educational sector in Denmark, and nobody really wanted to participate. It was too complex. So we want to put the complexity somewhere else. Where? To someone else. In the middle here, you have a hub. Now you have a centralized component that people can connect to. And you can see they can connect using different colors on the arrows there. So they can use multiple protocols. They can change their protocols if they like. And you can take all the complexity to someone in the middle here who actually cares about this. And you can even take the authentication bit, the login thing. The name ID could be placed there. And then you have login centralized, and you have all the complexity put in a box in the middle outside of your business domain, which is a good thing, because you don't have to think about it. You have some specialists thinking about that. That's not what we do, because a centralized login is not really viable in all environments. So what we came up with in the end is decentralized login, centralized federation component, which is what I manage in my daily job along with 3 other guys in this room. And all the complexity is what we care about. We care about consent, we care about attribute, we care about the formats and development of new attributes, protocols, all of the boring stuff, all of the unsexy technical stuff that you really don't want to care about, we care about. This is what it looks like. This is an image of the running installation, and we have 152 services connected over here, and 182 over there, and it's a beautiful butterfly. We used to call it a butterfly. Here we can see a lot of things. Now, one of the first problem we discussed was security. Now the users can authenticate using this infrastructure with their normal authentication mechanism, which is typically username and password. It could be NemID, it could be your thumb, it could be something different. We don't really care, but what they usually use. The update problem is also solved because you get fresh information about the users, and you can trust the information because it's not stemming from the users, it comes from the institutions that they are affiliated with. So this is not a Facebook login where everybody can claim to be Obama. This is really thorough work. This is something you can trust. The information about the users is correct. This is where we are. I love this photo. This is Graham Bell calling for the first time a long-distance call. It's a long time ago. It was in 1892. And the reason why it was a long distance, it was 944 miles, and that's very long at the time at least. Now we can call around the globe within seconds. The reason why it was called a call was that it was not a telegraph. You could in fact understand what he was saying. This is where we are. We can now transfer information about users, and people can understand to some degree. If they understand the language and so on, they can understand. But the problem now, this is where we are. We have the green circles as the clubs or the federations, the identity federations in the academic world alone. Looks like this. They're everywhere. And the problem is we have to interconnect them. How do we understand a response that comes out of Portugal? How do the Australians or the Chinese or the Americans understand what we're sending about Danish users to them? We have the Kalmar Union, number 2, has been operational for 3 years now, I think. The Kalmar Union is easy because we know each other very well. We have a long history and we understand each other, more or less. So we have a collaboration where we can now log into a Finnish site using Danish identities. There's another program running called EduGain, a European scale, and then NemID and all the national ID cards in Europe are now being interconnected through a program called STORE, which is EU funded. That's the goal. So a lot of things are happening. We're working on the security bit, we're working on the usability bit, and see if we can get some more trust introduced into the system. And now what we also have to think about is the money, because security is expensive, and we want to make sure that we have a grasp of how much money do we spend, and do we get anything out in return at all, or just something reasonable compared to the investment we did. Here's some traffic. This is gathered at the hub here. There you can see the traffic, numbers of users and numbers of logins. Numbers of logins are the blue line, and the numbers of users are the red line. And since mid-2010, we've had more than 21 million logins here. So that's a lot. Is it, or is it not? Well, you have to think of what the context is. This is primarily the educational sector. I think it's a lot. And the good thing about having such a hub in the middle here is that we can generate statistics. We can know exactly which services are being used by, in this case, Aarhus University. And you can see up there with all the colored lines, the traffic patterns. This is a good thing. They are actually using this stuff. The other good thing about it is that they only integrated once. They only made one connection into the central hub, and all of a sudden they're using many services, using the same infrastructure, reusing their authentication systems, reusing their user database and all the updated info. We can go to the other side of the hub, and we can have a look at a single service provider over there, and we know who are using that. And also, please notice, this is a good thing, it's being used, and they only made a single integration. What we did then, to get this notion of how things are going, we made an estimate, a very simple estimate. How much did it cost for each connection? Out of the more than 300, very few of them is not attached with a cost estimate. So we have an idea of, if they integrated and spent 50,000 kroner, and each of them costed 50,000 kroner, they saved a lot of money. Or, didn't they? No, they did not save money, because they actually took money out of their pocket. So they invested money. But they invested money in a system that reuses a lot of infrastructure from many places, and therefore they get a benefit out of it. They invest, they spend money, and they get a benefit. And let's have a look at what the benefit is. How am I doing on time? I'm doing fine, that's good. The integration cost estimates, as I said, go for each and every connection here. And I hope you get the picture that now we do the calculation for each and every single entity. We have a look at the statistics and we see how many users, how much is it being used by how many institutions. And what we will find now, this is now worked out in dollars, yesterday's exchange rate, because we have English-speaking people here, but you can do the math. And you can see that with no federation, if there had not been an orchestrated way of doing this, in this case we have a hub in the middle, but it could happen in other configurations as we saw before. Without the federation, the integration cost for all the used connections, all of those that we know have been used in reality, would have been something like $9.5 million US. In fact, they only spent 1.5. So the benefit, which is the benefit of all, is almost $8 million US. If we take the integration cost, we have not looked at the complex stuff that we do in the middle there. Protocol translation, consent management. We do more. Look, if we keep hitting the wrong buttons, if we add the consent management, I have 10 minutes left. If we add the consent management and estimate that would cost you $2,000 a year, which is a very low estimate, then all of a sudden the numbers go down from $9.5 million up to almost $10 million per year. And that's because all of these entities will have to do the same thing over and over again, and we added $2,000 per entity. Simple. Everybody has to do the same thing. Okay? Costs more. That's obvious. If we look at one of the really complex things that we do, which is this attribute release profile negotiation, that means that when someone asks to get connected, we ask them what kind of personal information about the users do you need to authorize them access. And some say, well, we need the user's name, and where they come from, and their email address. And if that is in proportion with what they do and what the service provides to the user, that's just fine. If they also ask for the social security number and the mobile phone number and the name of their grandmother, we start to negotiate. And I sit in the middle there, and I'm tough because I have no interest in anything else than just complying with the law which says that minimal disclosure is the thing. You don't hand out any more information than is needed for the purpose of the service. I don't get money. I'm publicly funded. I'm a hard negotiator, so they only get what they need. And if everybody had to do the same, all more than 150 institutions, that would go to the legal departments. They will employ lawyers and so on. So that's very expensive. And if I add a cost of only just $10,000 per service, per institution, then the calculation explodes, and that's why we get to the number which is very, very high, more than 180 million. And $10,000 is a low estimate. From our neighboring countries that do this kind of thing, we know that these are in fact prohibitive actions. To do this kind of negotiation can take up to 2.5 years for a legal department in an American university to do. It's a very, very big cost saver, and therefore also a very, very big benefit of the system. This is why this kind of architecture is taking off in so many sectors like military, car industry, aerospace. All these have the same kind of problem. They have to be cost effective. And when you show them these kind of numbers, they understand, if they have not already, why this is being used as a technology of tomorrow. So, now we've solved all the world's problems.